going to do something a little different today. This weekend we celebrate a few things. Our graduates are going to be at Mass tomorrow morning to celebrate the Baccalaureate Mass as they celebrate this important next step in their life's journey. And we also, of course, celebrate Mother's Day this weekend. So, of course, happy Mother's Day to all the moms. And then we're almost 2 weeks into the month of May, which is a month dedicated to Mary, the mother of Jesus. And to commemorate all three of these things, I want to share something with you. One of my best friends, Scott Yates, he works for a nonprofit group called the Catholic Foundation of Southern Nebraska. And bear with me, I'm going to get really nerdy and finance bro-ish. And if it's going to seem completely out of place for a Mother's Day homily, but bear with me. So the Catholic Foundation, what it does is it sets up foundations and funds for churches all across Nebraska, and increasingly even further afield. They take investments, they take donations, real estate, other assets, and they invest them into a stock portfolio that grows over time. So both of our parishes here in Cambridge and Arapahoe have opened such funds. And these funds are called donor-designated funds, which is different than, say, an endowment. With an endowment, typically the beneficiary or the person or the company that receives the money from the fund only has access to the interest that is generated by the fund itself. But a donor-designated fund is different because since it's an invested portfolio, it's not just gaining interest, it's gaining value concurrent with the stock market. And some months on the stock market it's down, some months are up, but generally the stock market steadily goes up, and so does our fund. So the Catholic Foundation of Southern Nebraska has a board of directors. They're all experienced money managers, and they have a track record of an average of doubling the initial gift every 10 years. So for a $10,000 gift in 30 years, it'll be worth $80,000, which is remarkable. And that's way better than simply, getting the 0.5 or 1% interest from an endowment or a savings account. What also differentiates a donor-designated fund from an endowment is that with an endowment, only the interest can be used. But with a donor-designated fund, the entire thing is liquid, meaning that all of the funds are available all the time. The original donor designates the entity and the steward of the fund, hence the name donor-designated fund. For example, the funds that our parish have, it's in our name, and the pastor is the designated caretaker of the fund. So, for example, if there's an emergency and the pastor gets hit with a $50,000 bill for, replacing an AC and heating system, for example, he can immediately tap into that revenue stream if the parish is unable to cover it outright from checking. Another thing that makes a donor-designated fund unique is that once the fund is opened, anybody can add to it. You don't have to be the original donor. Since the fund now belongs to the parish, it's for everyone to contribute to if they so wish, but they have to specify that. A pastor just can't take a portion of the Sunday collection and start throwing it into the donor-designated fund. It has to be designated by the donor to go into it legally. A couple of weeks ago, the reason I bring all this up, a couple of weeks ago, the Catholic Foundation contacted me and asked if they could do a spotlight article in their newsletter regarding the fund that we set up in Arapahoe a few years ago. This fund was opened with approximately $80,000 in it, and through it, the investment has grown to over $120,000 in just 4 years. A 30% increase, which is awesome. And it's actually a little bit ahead of its 10-year schedule pace. The title of this fund is the Our Lady of Fatima Shrine Fund, in honor of the shrine built in Arapahoe by Father Henry Dennis. And this is the point of me telling you all this, that I want to read you the article that comes from this newsletter from the Catholic Foundation, because it ties in nicely with all the things that we're celebrating this weekend. The title of the article is A Promise Preserved. And I'm going to throw in my 2 cents as we go through the article. So it begins, today the Our Lady of Fatima Fund, a donor-designated fund benefiting St. Germanus Parish in Arapahoe, helps preserve that sacred story. Established through the generosity of an anonymous donor, the fund is open to anyone who would like to make a gift. For those who love this place, the fund also offers a way to keep Father Dennis's promise alive. Father Henry Dennis was born December 31st, 1909, in Goworowo, Poland. By the beginning of World War II, he was serving as a Polish military chaplain with the rank of captain. Less than 20 days after the war began, he was captured by the Germans on September 19, 1939, when he stayed behind after a battle in Kutno to bury 37 soldiers. That act of mercy led to nearly 6 years of captivity. At first, Father Dennis and other chaplains were told that they would be released under the rules of the Geneva Convention. For roughly 15 minutes, they were considered free. When the Gestapo arrived, however, the priests were declared political enemies of the state. Father Dennis was first imprisoned at Buchenwald. Later, he was transferred to Dachau. So I want to explain kind of the situation here. Dachau was a work camp for political enemies of the Nazi Party. And this is different than the probably more notorious and more well-known concentration camps like Auschwitz. Concentration camps, the entire purpose was to concentrate or to reduce the population of unwanted people that the Nazis had declared not fit for life. And they accomplished concentrating the population by simply murdering them as fast as possible. So at Auschwitz peak efficiency, most people died within minutes of arriving at the camp. They weren't actually citizens or, inhabitants of the camp, and that's why they were often called death camps. Work camps, like Dachau, were different. So at work camps, the prisoners were used as slave labor in factories and in mines and on farms, and they would leave each morning. They would work like a 16-hour day or longer, and then they would return to camp. However, just because Dachau wasn't a death camp doesn't mean that there wasn't death. Father Dennis says that he saw death every single day. So back to the story. Father Dennis was transferred to Dachau, where he endured starvation, forced labor, illness, and punishment. He witnessed death almost daily. He was forbidden to live his priesthood openly. For us, the offering of the Mass, confessions, and reciting the Rosary, all of this was prohibited under the penalty of death, he recalled in a 1971 interview. 2 Austrian priests were caught praying the Rosary, and they were killed on the spot. Instead of praying out loud, Father Dennis counted the Rosary on his fingers. In 1944, Father Dennis was subjected to medical experiments, including repeated malaria injections. He believed that he was destined for the final injections, the one he had seen kill the others. During those dark days, a fellow prisoner, a German priest named Father Joseph Kentenich, spoke words that stayed with him. "You will live," he told Father Dennis. "The Americans will liberate us. Christ will save a number of priests to give witness to the world. You will be among them. Pray the Rosary. There will be peace. Remember Our Lady of Fatima. Spread her message of peace. To preserve freedom, we must pray, do penance, and we must sacrifice." So on a side note, this Father Joseph Kentenich would go on to found the International Schoenstatt Movement, which is a family-oriented Catholic organization that promotes dedication to Jesus through his Blessed Mother Mary. My family has been a part of the Schoenstatt movement since I was young. On October 7th, 1944, the Feast of the Holy Rosary, Father Dennis was standing in a long, cold, rainy roll call at Dachau. So another side note here, the roll call, as he describes them, they weren't just roll calls, they were a form of punishment. They'd be forced to stand on their feet for hours and hours on end, up to 12 hours at times. And they were to stand at attention, and on this occasion that Father Dennis is talking about, the roll call was done as a punishment for 2 prisoners who attempted to escape the camp. And throughout the roll call, random names would be called, and you'd have to respond at attention, or they would be selected for immediate execution. Back to the story. Prisoners were being counted, the dead were brought out and placed in line with the living. At that moment he prayed. He said, "The Rosary took me up there, into a different world. There were moments that I did not hear anything." Father Dennis's name and number were called, but he did not hear them. To fail to report meant death, but when the prisoners returned to camp, no one called for him again. The Nazis had taken enough victims that day. A dear friend, Father Francis Doctora, had also been called, and he never came back, he said. And it was on that day, October 7th, 1944, that I made a promise, a vow, that if I ever leave the camp alive, I would give the Blessed Mother some kind of visible gratitude, maybe a little shrine. Dachau was liberated on April 29, 1945, 5 years, 7 months, and 11 days after Father Denis's capture. He was gravely ill. His weight was recorded at 90 pounds. After the war, he avoided returning to communist-controlled Poland and made his way to Italy. There he began sharing images of Our Lady of Częstochowa, which Our Lady of Częstochowa is, you've probably seen it before, it's probably the most famous picture, one of the most famous images of Our Lady came out of Poland, his native land. So Father Denis was already seeking some visible way to express gratitude for Mary's intercession. Eventually, he learned that the Diocese of Lincoln needed priests. "America is my goal," he responded. "Father, help me." Bishop Louis Kuchera, who's actually died 69 years ago today, Bishop Louis Kuchera welcomed him to Nebraska with words of warmth and freedom. "Father Denis," the bishop wrote, come as to your own home, healthy or sick. There will always be some kind of work for you. Forget the past, ours is a free land. Come, and I will welcome you." So in 1948, Father Denis arrived in Lincoln, and after brief assignments at Grafton, where he was hilariously the assistant pastor, if you know how big Grafton is, and Denton, he was assigned in 1949 finally to St. Germanus Parish in Arapahoe with a mission at St. Michael Church in Oxford. So sort of a side note, this was pre-1981, I think, that Cambridge and Arapahoe had their own separate priests. The two parishes were combined later on. Back to the story. So the promise that Father Denis made in Dachau came along with him to Arapahoe. Father Denis longed to build the shrine, but parish needs came first. St. Michael Church in Oxford, which was the mission to Arapahoe at the time, needed major repairs, including being moved and having a basement dug under it. The parishioners were generous, but they were few. And then, on October 7th, 1954, exactly 10 years to the day that his life had been spared, Father Denis celebrated a Mass of Thanksgiving. That same day, a man named Bernard Pischke knocked on his door. Mr. Pischke had grown up attending church in Oxford. He wanted to give back. He offered to leave 120 acres of land and the proceeds of his estate to St. Michael Church. Father Denis turned to his housekeeper and said, "If all of this is true, what this man says, that is a miracle." Mr. Pischke replied, "I don't know what that means for you, but if you see this as a miracle, the miracle you have." After Mr. Pischke's death in 1955, his gift provided enough to care for the parish's needs, and it also opened the door for Father Denis to begin building the shrine he had promised. Just think the whole exactly 10 years later thing is crazy. But Father Denis began raising funds for a shrine to the Blessed Virgin Mary, receiving gifts from nearly every state. Some people sent money, others sent stones or seashells to be incorporated into the shrine. In August of 1956, 7 years after Father Denis arrived in Arapahoe, the Our Lady of Fatima shrine was completed beside St. Germanus Church. At the center stands Our Lady of Fatima. Around her are angels, the three shepherd children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, and figures of sheep and cattle. Over the decades, trees, flowers, memorial plaques, and prayer spaces have been added. Father Denis expressed his hope simply. "May she stand there forever," he said, with her prayer for peace and her message for our prayers, for our penance, and for our sacrifices, to preserve our life and our freedom. God bless America. Through the Our Lady of Fatima Fund, the Catholic Foundation of Southern Nebraska offers a way for today's donors to join that story. A gift to the fund helps support St. Germanus Parish as it preserves the shrine, welcomes pilgrims, and carries forward Father Denis's message of peace and prayer. So that's the article, and I think it's well worth just considering about, the place that we are and kind of think about our events in our lives more critically and more thoughtfully than just sort of going through lives. Whoever considers themselves a son or a daughter of the church, or a son or a daughter of the Blessed Mother, we can all learn from Father Denis's life. The Blessed Mother will look out for you if you turn to her. If Jesus trusted her, we can do the same. When I was growing up, every day before catching the bus for school, our family would say a prayer dedicating the day to Jesus through Mary. And it went like this. My Queen, my Mother, I give myself entirely to you. And to show my devotion to you, I consecrate to you this day my eyes, my ears, my mouth, my heart, my entire self without reserve, as I am your own. My good Mother, guard me and defend me as your property and possession. Amen. You know, what's crazy about that prayer is it was popularized by Father Kentenich, the priest who was with Father Dennis in Dachau, and I would end up here 30 years later. There have been times in my life where I felt scared or unsure or unhappy or ashamed, and in those moments, I turned to Mary. When St. John Paul II's mother died when he was only 9 years old, he said, Mary, you are my mother now. Saint Mother Teresa had a very simple prayer to Mary in times of need. She would say, Mary, Mother of Jesus, be a mother to me now. And she said that if you ever feel distressed during your day, call upon Our Lady and just say this simple prayer. Mother Teresa says, I must admit this prayer has never failed me. Think of all the coincidences in the story of Father Dennis and the shrine, the multiple miracles it took for him to arrive in America and build the shrine. And think of that and know that God will work similar ways in our lives, but only if we look for them. It says, Jesus says in our gospel today, whoever loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and reveal myself to him. God will reveal himself to us if we look for him. God is there, and his mother is there with him. We only have to ask.